Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar. We've got a great webinar for you this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are today. Just waiting for the slides to fire up, and then we'll be good to go. So today we're going to be talking about channel incentives, what's working and what's not. A very important topic, I know, for a lot of you. We've got some great insights and some really interesting thoughts on the topic. But before we start, just like to cover a couple of housekeeping issues. We'll welcome questions, and there are two ways to ask a question. The first is to click the hand icon on the control panel. That means you raise your hand. You can then be unmuted and you can actually ask the question live, which will be answered by our speakers. The second method is to type in the question. So ask your question in the chat module in the control panel. All of the questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. So feel free, jump in, ask those questions. We'd love to answer them, but as I say, that will happen at the end of the webinar. So I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers today. And our first speaker is Emily Rainone, and she's the Global Client Director at Vistex. She's been with Vistex for almost 3 years, working with many existing clients and lots of new implementations. Prior to Vistex, she focused on marketing and enablement to channel partners at another significant supplier. She's very passionate about marketing and brand awareness. She's also the proud wife and mother to 2 children under the age of 5. So as you can imagine, in the current lockdown, Emily is not just a client director, she's a mother, a teacher, housekeeper, a cook, and everything else that gets thrown her way. So looking forward to hearing from Emily later on. Our second speaker is Gonzalez, and he's the Chief Strategy Officer of Zift Solutions. He's a prominent industry analyst. Many of you will know Laz, and he's a thought leader who serves as the Chief Strategy Officer at Zift. He brings unparalleled channel expertise, having served as strategic advisor to many leading business-to-business channel programs worldwide. Before Zift, Laz was Group Director of Channel Sales and Marketing Strategies at Sirius Decisions, where his team published extensive research on channel best practices. Laz gained extensive experience with OEMs, strategic alliances, distributors and resellers during 2 decades as a channel practitioner himself. So Laz has seen it from all sides of the fence. And Laz, before we start, why don't you just spend a couple of moments telling us a little bit about Zift?
Oh, thank you, Rod. But I must say that introduction made me feel old. No, needless to say, as you said, I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Zift, and if you don't already know Zift, you should listen to what people are saying. It's really a company that's bringing together under one platform everything you need to run and manage and create value from your channel program. So we're really excited to be part of this, to be sharing some of the best practices. We have a view into 500,000 partners on our platform and over 100 suppliers. And the idea is that coming to this discussion today, we can talk about some of those experiences. I'll also, I'm joined by Emily, and Emily's got a great background. I'm going to let her talk a little bit about Vistex.
Thanks, Laz. Yeah, so Vistex is a software company that supports all of your go-to-market initiatives, spanning industries from channel and high tech, where I sit, to music, to agriculture, to name a few. So we just celebrated our 21st anniversary this year. As I mentioned, I sit in the tech channel space, servicing our clients' needs, especially as it relates to facilitating incentive processes. In addition to our custom offerings, we also offer our channel conduit suite that includes solutions for MDF, rebates, various promotions, rewards, and facilitates payments.
So this puts you in an expert's position to have the discussion we want to have today, right, Emily?
That's what we hope, right?
Right. So let's share with our viewers what the topics are that we're going to hit head on. First we're just going to start with a few views of what we're hearing, and then we'll move quickly into incentives best practices. Both Emily and myself, we have a couple of case studies that we want to share with you, and I promise that you'll have some great takeaways, including some good measurements and some good tools. So as you walk away from this presentation today, we hope that you'll have a better understanding of some of the hurdles facing channel leaders, especially when they're implementing an incentives strategy, whether that's for a high touch or a low touch partner. Given that we're going to share some case studies, you're going to really walk away with some, feet on the street feedback about what's working, what's not working, and maybe you can adjust this for your own program. I made a promise that you also have something that you can take, an info guide, kind of a battle card, as Emily would call it, that you could kind of look at whenever you're thinking about creating an incentive program and you're looking for a guide. Now, these are the promises that we'll deliver on through the remainder of this presentation. Emily sees a lot from her vantage point, so I'd like her to maybe, Emily, could you talk a little bit about some of the pain points that you're seeing around incentives?
Yeah, for sure. So, from where I sit, I hear pain points at various stages of the incentive cycle. Pain points don't always derive just from one stage of the incentive or from one incentive type. There's varying pain points in DF programs, and there are rebates. Same goes for rewards programs, other incentives. So these are a few of the main ones that I hear. Low adoption and utilization numbers. In this instance, I'm hearing, why aren't people claiming or earning? Why aren't my partners utilizing these incentives? And to that, I typically think that people are likely ramping up a new incentive program without the proper planning. This could mean they're not piloting a large program in advance. It could mean they're not going through the motions to market this new incentive or funding period, but that's typically what I see there. Keeping up with an oversaturated market. This isn't necessarily one that I hear from clients or manufacturers normally, but I'm painfully aware of it from the voice of the partner. Partners have so many incentives and programs and special tracks to be educated on. And it's easy to feel like you're offering the best and the most, but it's really important to keep in mind the competition and what they're likely doing, what they're offering, what their cadence is to your partner, and either aligning with that or pulling back based on the pain points of the partner and being so inundated. Lack of regional or department alignment. I see lack of alignment happening in two ways. Sometimes we see lack of regional alignment where regions are having difficulties adhering to certain global program rules or processes. In addition to lack of regional alignment, we see lack of alignment within a manufacturer between departments. So, this can lead to difficulties really successfully rolling out an incentive. I think this ROI, program validation, this is a universal pain point because it can be difficult to get to. I'm not opening that can of worms today. I'm not going to be talking about that at all. I'm just noting that this is a continued pain point that we're hearing. And then lack of automation. This is one that I hear a lot that I'm sure last year's as well. Many new clients that I speak with feel this pain point out of a need to create an efficient process that provides them with the system and protocols that they need to be able to properly, facilitate their programs that create simplification for them, ease of doing business for the partner. So that's another one that I hear. And, a few of the pain points that we might start to see with the state of our world with the new coronavirus. And in fact, I should say, I'm not hearing any specific pain points just yet. Other than concern over what's to come, concern for some of the medium or smaller partners who maybe aren't set up in a sturdy way, to really sustain a possible economic downturn due to what's going on. Laz, are you hearing any specific pain points regarding the current state of our world?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things regarding incentives is, getting partners to use tools so that they can continue having a dialogue with their customers. Clearly they're behind screens like we are, and they don't have the opportunity to go meet their customers, to close the deal, to stay present in mind. So I think that, there is this dialing up of the tools that are available for companies to continue helping the partners have that conversation. But that leads to the point that you raise here, which is, there's a lack of automation. Most incentive programs, they're run on spreadsheets, and it's really difficult to do that. Hey, why don't we ask our audience what they think some of the big hurdles are for them based on what you shared here. We're going to take a poll. And so you'll have a chance now using the control panel to answer the poll. And if you would pick which of these are your biggest pain points. And so is it low adoption? Is it keeping up with an oversaturated market, lack of regional alignment, or lack of automation? So which is your pain point? Please pick one of the four.
So if you just click on the one that is most relevant for you, and we'll close the poll in just a moment. So please do jump on and give us those answers.
Yeah. Okay.
Couple of moments for people. Still a few.
I'm not surprised to see, the two that are in the lead here. Low adoption and automation, right, Laz?
Yeah, I think I'll close the poll now and share the results. But you're right, low adoption and lack of automation come in a dead tie, and it's really companies struggling with these issues. So we feel your pain, and I think it's time we talk a little bit about what the results and what the effective things you can do are. So Emily, you have any thoughts on what drives effectiveness?
Yeah, so, in thinking in terms of counteracting those pain points, there are some things that, we feel can be done to really drive effectiveness, aside from concocting the ultimate incentive package that will have your partners, kind of salivating at the thought of reaching their sales goals.
Right.
There are other factors that program owners, should be considering and implementing prior to rolling out a new incentive. There's so many moving parts when we're talking about incentives as a whole. There's a wide range of choices. We know for sure that one size does not fit all as it relates to your partners. And it's really important to have a cohesive strategy. We see companies that are considering all the right factors throughout their processes are very successful at running incentive programs. And I really feel that partner engagement is a huge piece in driving effective incentives. Right now, with the current state of the world, driving effectiveness is even more important with partner engagement. I'm hearing from my clients that one way that they're doing that is facilitating more engagement and support for their partners. I'm hearing that in turn, partners are doing the exact same thing with their customers. For partners, it's not just a time to support their customers, but also to support their changing workplace, with moving things to remote and the evolving situation there. So a lot of thought goes into that. But, I do want to take a deeper dive into partner engagement to see how it drives effectiveness. I think that there are several things that must be planned and initiated prior to rolling out a new incentive or incentive dollars. Keep in mind, what I'm about to speak about right now is the piece of the timeline after your executive management has approved the strategy and the budget for this incentive, and you're more in a place to roll this out. So driving partner engagement in your incentives really should start from a place of deep understanding of the partner group that you're looking to incentivize. And I think that surveying your partners and your partner account managers that work with them is one of the best complements to strong data on the partner set itself. By taking the time to understand what your partners are selling and why, and what drives them, what's worked well for them in the past, you have your first opportunity to create buy-in of your new incentive. When it comes time for the rollout of your incentive, you're practically serving them something that they've asked for in an ideal world. If a partner has a hand in providing you feedback of what incentive mixtures are working well, or just providing feedback in general, ideally they'll feel more tied to a new offer. So that's the survey partners and PAMS piece. Next, you go into marketing your incentives, and more partner interaction comes into play. I think that failing to market your incentives is one of the easiest to spot mistakes when rolling out incentives and leaving dollars on the table. When we're looking at company level spiffs or claimable back-end dollars, if partners aren't claiming, they either don't know about the spiff or it doesn't benefit them in any way, aka that research on the front end wasn't done. So creating awareness behind your incentive or new rebate scenario or the new funding quarter is really key. Next, you want to help your partners plan. This comes into play typically with MDF programs. Manufacturer planning involvement in the entire process really, ensures that partners are aware of the importance of how those funds are used. And also that, there's players tracking this with stake in their game. So if funds are rolled out with nothing more than a notification of usable funds, that all but allows for partners to kind of ignore the importance of the process or maybe use the funds in a way that they weren't meant to be spent. I can't tell you how many times I hear clients tell me that they've found partners submitting the same lead list quarter to quarter. And that tells me that there's a lack of engagement on the front end, that there's a lack of engagement throughout the process that really should be in place. And planning can happen with rebates as well, and planning the goals that you want to meet with your rebates programs. So once you've surveyed, marketed, and planned, and you go and you launch your program, right? I think that check-ins are a necessary part throughout any type of program. It's not just for MDF programs where there's many activities involved in a campaign. It also should be for rebates. It's to check in, remind, notify partners of the time that they have left, where they're at, any predictive indications that can help them to get to their sales goals to receive the incentives. And then, just to tie it all back, once the program period is complete, you can continue partner engagement by reviewing what happened and where goals were met. This really should include the partners, not just that engaged the most and benefited the most, but all partners. Help them understand, not only what they got back, but what it could have meant to their bottom line, what they left on the table. And this really further solidifies that engagement and creates an excitement really for the next quarter or for the next whatever time period it is that you're running that incentive or your next new incentive.
Emily, those are great points on the process that you need to follow, and clearly I agree with you. You can't take a build it and they will come approach, right? I think the other side of this is once they come to your portal or once they come to your organization and want to participate in an incentives program, you have to have a really clear understanding of where the bar is. On the screen, I thought it'd be really useful for our viewers to have a quick snapshot of all the different types of incentive programs that you can create. And one of the things as a supplier you need to recognize is that many of these are in play today with those partners that you're trying to get their attention to participate in your program. I'll draw a special deep dive on onboarding programs, because I really feel that time to value is one metric that a lot of suppliers are trying to achieve. So when they look at a partner, they're thinking, how quickly can we get that partner up to speed? And we see a lot of onboarding velocity programs that kind of reward the partners when they do the right things early on in the program. And that doesn't just come in terms of like MDF rewards or things like that, but it could also be funds that are made available at the time of launch. When companies get together and they form business relationships, that's a point in time when they want to make a little bit of noise about what's going on. So seeding those launch events and those types of activities for creating demand or awareness are key, and something that you should think about instead of just kind of throwing money at partners to get them to do things. And if you remember in Emily's slide, she talked about one of those hurdles being getting an ROI or a visibility on programs, and a lot of organizations don't have that line of sight. So if that's your problem, then you should really be thinking about incentives as they relate to getting that reporting back from partners. So as you poll partners or as they take steps to inform you, whether that's to connect their platform to yours and get you the information you need, when they do that, that's a great time to get them to earn some incentives or actually use those to do that reporting. So three key ones that I think you should think about, but actually there's a little bit more in terms of just providing the incentive program itself. Emily talked a lot about process, and I think there's some key factors that go into providing the partner with the kind of guidance that they need to move forward. And first and foremost is data. You know, I'm constantly surprised, Emily. I don't know if you guys see it as well, the lack of data that most channel programs have on their partners. Do you see the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Or just complex data, data that needs to be cleaned. Absolutely.
Right. When they do have data, sometimes it's not in the best shape, right?
Hmm.
Uh, well, we all know what a mess that could be for leads, but if you think about partners, you really should know what their capabilities are, what the selling regions are, what kind of transactions do you want them to generate, and knowing this history, historical view, and also their target view of who their customers are and what they're going after will help you really create a better program. Right. So I think data is a key part. You know, I have encouraged through the concierge, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the term concierge, right, we're talking about the Sherpa that leads the partner step by step through the process. And you know, these are agencies, these are third parties, and sometimes they're even in-house folks that work with you to engage with those partners. You know, one thing is just to get them there, but sometimes they need them need a little bit of help to make some choices, right? So having a concierge function that they can reach out to, whether it be by chat or by phone or by email, would be really helpful as well. As you go through the process, you'll learn what's working and what's not. Even today, you'll see some best practices that are available in some of the case studies that we share with you. I think that you should take note because those are really important to share with your partners, and even, you know, to start thinking about what are the ways that you could motivate them and use that to motivate other partners in your program. You know, there's the saying that you shouldn't fund what you can't measure. And I think that is more true with respect to incentives than under any other area of program in channels, is the idea that you've got to really measure results. You need to know what's working, when it's working, what are some of the leading indicators, what are some of the lagging indicators. And just in a few minutes, we're going to go into what those metrics could look like and give you some hard numbers. So these are all things that you should take into consideration, but enough theory. Let's get to the case studies. And Emily, you've got the first one, and
Hmm.
it's really, we're going to talk about high touch partners, the larger companies, and you've decided to pick the network services provider. Can you tell us a little bit about them and what's different when you run incentive programs?
Yeah. So, when I think of the larger NSP, if ever there was a time to really bring out your robust capabilities, it would be with your high touch partners. High touch partners typically focus on most product offerings and sometimes in an array of industries that you're also servicing. And because of the complexity that this brings, you really should be bringing these partners more. So this means, more incentives, more incentive dollars, more specialty tracks, and just, more overall benefits, more. This, allows you more than ever to be their one-stop shop. We talked about, the inundation of offerings that they're getting, and it's good to think about the fact that they're probably getting pitched on the one-stop shop from your competitor. And so for that reason, aligning all the offerings and bringing them the entire kit and caboodle is necessary in this case. So, this includes the pre-sale enablement motions of offering them MDF or co-op programs, and tying that really into deal reg, tying it into lead tracking capabilities to really further engage and create full buy-in to the program and ensure that these are your top partners that you're aligning in the best way possible. And then taking it from the pre-sale enablement programs to the post-sale reward. So offering those rebates based on sales and goals and the scenario types, the various scenarios that you need. And then upon deal close, individual sales rewards programs. So, I want to go into a little bit more detail really about what's surrounding these main incentives that we see, working well. So for MDF, we continue to see certainly a rise in MDF budgets and eligible partners. One of the things that I'm noticing in MDF programs as it relates to these larger NSPs is flexibility. Really, flexibility in programming allows for larger partners to use dollars in a way that will benefit them most, and sometimes in ways that we haven't thought to include, that we don't prefer to include, or just thinking outside of the box. So one of those things that we're seeing with MDF programs is the creation of a net new funding program dedicated to a smaller subset of the large partners across the globe, that allows for maybe just a few activities. It's not necessarily labeled MDF. It might be something else fund, and the spend is tied to motions involved with various activities, but just headed under a few activities so that it creates some flexibility. It's just another way for large partners to create mutually beneficial campaigns. Another thing I'm hearing right now is allowing MDF spend tied to motions involved with closing a deal as opposed to generating new leads. So for instance, I'm seeing very large partners that want to use maybe $100,000 to finally close a very long sales cycle, or to aid in motions that will help them close a very long sales cycle, that will maybe net them out, say, like $3 million. So you can see the return there. Typically, we're seeing this, 100K being used for things like NASCAR events or Super Bowl tickets. That's not new or novel. It's just more controversial when you look at the compliance of tying this to, getting that sale to close as opposed to something on the front end. And we find that if you tie this type of funding activity to maybe a deal registration or something similar, then the relationship of the sale to the activity deems a little bit more beneficial, and it's making a little bit more sense. When we look at rebates, certainly rebates are still driven by different product groups, partners, and geos, and the focus typically goes to what you want your partners to sell or newer technologies. But we are seeing a lot of rebate programs right now that have growth capabilities when something like a certification within the product is obtained. So if you're certified in a track, you can receive higher rebates. Or if you're certified in a track, you are eligible for additional scenarios. So we're seeing that tie there for partners to be certified, they get more, specifically as it relates to rebates. So, you want to think about other promotions and incentives to understand where you need to fill the gaps with other partners. Sometimes this comes into play with short-term offerings or late in the quarter offerings. Maybe you're running a contest or some type of promotion, but this is another area where we see very specialized tracks for sometimes just one really large partner to maybe drive the sale of a new product. And then looking at rewards programs, this is really where I feel this is one of the most important areas to jumpstart the sales cycle. To ensure that the back-end rebates happen, is by incentivizing the sales folks. And, when we talk about rewards programs today, the most important thing, aside from, including compelling enough rewards, is also the ease of doing business and, allowing the salespeople to claim easily. And so one of the things that we're seeing are express claiming, what we call express claiming, and where there's a list of maybe sales that are coming up on their view, and they can go in and accept those as their own. Of course, there's some auditing that happens on the back end, but that's just a very quick way for them to claim on those sales and partake in the rewards program. Another thing that we're seeing is rewards based on more frequent claiming. So they're earning rewards on the sale, and then they're earning rewards on additional claims. So we're seeing that with rewards. And I want to go into a few more things that I feel you almost need to be including at this point, aside from the incentives themselves. So there's a few things that you're probably very familiar with: white glove concierge and dashboards, and then something a little bit more novel, like credits. Laz mentioned before the idea of concierge services. You can hear it called all kinds of things across the board: white glove concierge, concierge services. I second what he noted, that this is very important for those larger partners. We're not talking all of the partners. It's maybe, your top 20, your top whatever. But it's just a little bit of hand holding in addition to your PAM or CAM, to ensure that they're involved in all the right programs, that their claiming is going very smoothly, that they're getting paid quickly and on time, that the planning processes are happening in a really at a really deep level. Looking over to dashboards, this is important because for your partners, in order to be able to create a snapshot for them of all the moving parts, a dashboard facilitates that. Where they are, goal for rebates, what they've earned and how many dollars they've had to spend, are available for them to spend on MDF. I see dashboards being beneficial not just for the large subset of partners, but for the many as well. So dashboards for all. However, I am seeing a trend in building out dashboards for maybe 5 really large partners or 10 really large partners as it relates to specific incentives that they're receiving. So boards are really important in that snapshot, and then can help program owners too to create snapshots for their executive management as well. So the interesting thing that I wanted to talk about is credit. Credits is something that I'm starting to hear about a lot. This is basically a new way to kind of offer money to your partners. I'm not hearing credits necessarily in one universal way. So think of these as just another way to provide your partners money or discount. So typically we're seeing credits go through a request process, and then they might be granted upfront, maybe on something like a migration, or credits can be accrued for involvement in other activities and sit in a fund to be used for points for campaigns later on. So that's kind of the newest thing that I'm hearing being brought about. So that's what I feel is working. That's what I'm hearing for NSPs right now. Laz, do you have anything to add on that, or should we move on to the focus of the lower touch partners?
No, but I will say that that the way you've kind of put this together is going to be really helpful, because with the milestones and then the deep dive on the different incentives, I know people are trying to understand when to use what, right? So I think that this is clearly something that's going to be helpful to folks, and I think gives everyone an idea of what it takes to run an incentives program with large network services providers, companies that have mature, marketing organizations, and they're not just your average partner. So,
and you actually mentioned something to me yesterday about credits, and that you see this being very helpful in the current state of what's going on.
yeah. Well, this is around, a lot of partners today needing to have that extra capital up front. And so, when you think about the kinds of incentives, and if you want customers to buy into 2 and 3 year contracts, what I'm seeing is, distributors ponying up the lion's share of the partner's revenue up front. So if normally they would make that in, a 12-month or 24-month period, since that's money in the bank, I think what, some of the larger partners or the larger distributors are doing is they're saying, Mr. Partner, here you go. Here's your win right now, so that you can keep capitalizing your business. So I think that's very relevant to the current times and what we're facing, right? So, in contrast to the large provider, some of our viewers work with channel programs that have a multitude of partners. They call them low touch or the long tail partners. And I wanted to kind of get into a little bit of what it takes to support these partners through incentive programs. And the partners that I'm choosing for my case study here are the managed service providers. So unlike their larger cousins, the smaller managed service providers, you really cannot take a build it and they will come approach with these guys, right? This is a herd of partners that might transact, several times during the year, but collectively drive a lion's share of the revenue. And with managed services providers, trying to get that herd to kind of behave a certain way is where most companies are focusing their incentives, especially to support some of the multi-year recurring revenue models. You know, the key challenges for working with MSPs are, first and foremost, is that you've got to recognize that there isn't somebody on the other side that's fluent in having a marketing / incentives conversation to the point where you want to have it, especially around best practices. So you're going to see limited marketing resources. Because of the pace of technology, there's a lot of offerings coming to market, and these guys need to be you know, up to speed on it. And so a lot of incentives are focused on enablement and teaching and making sure they learn. But you know, channel sales is under pressure to show results, and as a result, you know, they have to encourage pipeline growth and align those incentives to those multi-year recurring revenue models. So, you know, 4 key requirements here in terms of incentives off to the right in the chart you can see is to tie the incentives to a prescriptive marketing activity. So in other words, just let them order and execute. Don't tell them, look, you know, if you create your first email program and you do this and you do that, you're going to earn points. Just give them the whole package, right? Let them run with it. You also have to think about the staff at the other end, right? You know, talking about millennial crowd, you know, on the screen, you know, a lot. And you also have to provide some gamification, if not mobile support, right? MSPs, you know, they work in a funny way. You individually, you might not just win when one rep wins, but when that whole regional team wins. And that's why I would say, you know, really target sales management for some of the incentives, whether it's a vertical or a geography. You know, look for the team leaders to help you push those programs down to their reps, and then, you know, really drive enablement to generate new leads, right? If you see partners making their milestones in terms of enablement that you've created for them in your promotional programs, you're going to see a leading indicator as to what's going to happen next, right? So this is a great way to start thinking about that kind of alignment. So some of the things that are really key here, again, is making sure that those partners are certified when they learn new offerings, right? That they, the reps are up to speed on new pricing and selling approaches. And if you think about it, if you want them to kind of sell multi-year deals. So again, what we're talking about is an MSP selling a contract over 2 or 3, you know, year period of time, and encouraging to do that rather than just take a 1-year contract from customers with that measurable pipeline growth. And to do that, again, the winning formula, and I would recommend these 3, just these 3 right now to get started, right, is a points-based program, and think of it tied to learning. So this is a learn and earn points-based program, and as your partners complete courses, right, then you you badge them, you move them forward. The second one is an upfront incentive for multiple MRR deals. Now, this is exactly what Emily mentioned before, right? If you're looking for them to sell multiple years, think about sharing a lion's share of that commission upfront, right? So this could be a cash premium or spiff, right? The third one is, you know, when they do a combination of things. So if they complete their certification and they've grown the pipeline to a certain level, then you can go back and reward them this way as well. Okay, so take note of these, and you know, you're going to have copies of this, I would imagine, and have all this to go back on. But these are 3 really good programs that you could run for what we're calling the MSP low touch partner. Okay, now one thing you've heard both from Emily and myself has been the idea of providing a seamless experience. And both Vistex and Zift, we got together and we integrated our platforms so that right from the marketing page, again, as you can see here, you can see the balances of your funds and download them. The purpose of showing you this is to show you how seamless you need to create the experience. The partner experience is first and foremost here, and getting them to use things by, you know, going into different applications and trying to do things is a failed strategy. This seamless experience is being run in, you know, enormous channel programs today with thousands of partners. And I think what Vistex and Zift have done together to make it so easy for them, for example, to just, you know, say, hey, I would like to take that activity and fund it with this MDF program that you've offered me is really the key to success. So I wanted to close the case studies with sharing with you what that looks like so that you can go back and think about it. I'd like to also now bring Emily back on and see what, Emily, let's give them some takeaways on both partners and what they could think about.
Yeah. So for your high touch partners, think about those specialized tracks, providing funds in a more custom way, but keeping that flexibility. Increase rebate dollars and scenarios for those that are, have certifications in various tracks. And then, really make your rewards program as simple as possible for the salespeople in order to claim and keep claiming.
Right. On the low touch partner incentives, we just went through it, but remember, be prescriptive and with these smaller partners when you use incentives. So don't remove the guesswork, right? Also, give them options, because they're not all the same. Some of them will stand out. Some of them will have marketing managers and folks like that. And you have to kind of tailor the programs to some degree as well. And I think the big takeaway is around making sure that you're offering them the right tools, right? Making sure that you've got some issues and plans for dealing with adoptions, because again, you can't take a build it and they will come approach with these smaller partners. Now, how can you tell if all of this is working, Emily?
Yeah, I wanted to put together some benchmarks and measurements, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the things that should be measured with your incentive. And this is where some of these percentages that I'm going to talk about are really where we think they should be. It will be interesting to see what happens, in the later half of the quarters to come, as far as with the engagements that we're seeing. Will we see that uptick because more people at home? Will we see it go down because people are suffering? But when it comes to MDF, optimal fund utilization is one of the things that we can gauge engagement by. So optimal MDF fund utilization is between 90 and 95%. And we really feel that it should at least be in this range for the funding period. Typical MDF fund utilization is not low or lower than this, but I do, have times where we're doing QBRs and we see it dip down heavily, and we have to understand why. And a lot of times there's some notifications that can be enacted to help remind partners along the way, and maybe they missed out on their claiming period. So there's some easy things that we can do to get that utilization back up. For rebates, the benchmarks really vary widely, but rebates will always be measured on the increase in sales of the product, increase in sales of the geo for whatever point in time. But some of the manufacturers that we're working with aim for full engagement of all eligible partners. They aim for all 100% of their eligible partner lists to be engaging in these rebates, whether it's new, whether it's a existing product. And I think that that's very noble. And so I think that if I'm working with a couple people that aim for their entire list of 200, 300, 400 partners to be engaging in these rebates and going down a list and saying, so-and-so hasn't started earning yet, let's figure out what's going on there. So if they're aiming for that, I think everyone should be aiming for that. It's more difficult to do, obviously, the larger the eligible partner list gets. When we were talking about those promotions, maybe those short running promotions, the spiffs, the incentives, we really want to see more than 50% participating. Again, typically that's on a more short-term program. If it's a long-term program, that would probably go up. Rewards adoption, that also varies in measuring engagement, but of partners participating in the rewards program, 80% adoption is probably a good gauge. So if you've got 1,000 partners, each partner averages 2 partner sellers, you want to see 80% of those claiming and engaging in your rewards program consistently. And then I just wanted to tie in dashboards again, because if you have additional dashboards, engagement in the partner dashboards really should be monitored. This is just an additional measurement of program success for you to take back to your executives and say, look at these dashboards. They want to know what their numbers are. They want to understand how they're doing and where they're tracking so that they can make those sales for us.
Sage words, great advice there, Emily. You really hit it with some of these benchmarks. You know, we promised that we would share with you sort of an info guide on using incentives for the 2 case studies that we took a deep dive on today. So I'm going to ask Emily to come back and help fill out the top half, which is really around the network services providers, and I'll fill out the bottom half, and you guys, when you download the presentations, like we said, you could use this like a battle card for using incentives in your organization. So Emily, would you join me for a sec to go through the
Yeah,
exercise?
yeah.
So the first one is the network services provider.
Yeah, so keep in mind your NSPs are your really large partners. These are partners that maybe have over 100 million in revenue. They're providing cloud infrastructure and services, and their sales and marketing capabilities are mature and advanced. They've got large sales teams. They know what they're doing. They have a vision. Sometimes it's even more difficult to get involved with that vision because they're so mature and advanced. The target incentives are all the normal players: MDF, promotions, rebates, rewards, include dashboards. That's not an incentive, but it's a way to show them what they're getting. Best practices: develop a broad array of white glove programs to support multiple selling methods, and really employ new ways to get your partners dollars. Think of those credits. Think of the flexibility in the programs that are already existing. And then measure that out. Use these measurements as a gauge on how your programs are doing, and look at it quarter to quarter, year to year, and find out if it's tracking that way.
Excellent. So that's the network service provider. For the managed services provider, when we look at them, when we look at those companies, they're less than 100 million in revenue. And remember, they're providing managed services typically to smaller customers. You have to assume that their sales and marketing capabilities are limited or evolving at best. When you think about the target incentives we just shared with you, MDF plays on both, but also the training incentives. Remember those training incentives because they have to learn a lot, and the points-based rewards for achieving those milestones, and spiffs for selling those upfront contracts. Don't forget to create a focused adoption plan. You cannot take a build it and they will come approach, and see if you can reward them for selling the multi-year contracts. And when you're thinking about metrics, it's really, number of partners applying, getting trained, the MDF usage, the number of net new versus multi-year contracts sold, the net new leads, and really you should be looking at the total pipeline created. Emily, we've taken our viewers through quite a journey on using incentives and what's working and what's not. I think we've reached that point where we owe them some thanks for staying on the line so long and not, with all the screaming and kicking that's going on, right?
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
And thanks, Rod. Thanks for having us both.
Well, Emily and Laz, thank you for a really cool webinar with some very, very interesting insights. And I've had a whole bunch of questions coming in during the journey over the last hour. So I'd like to fire some of those questions at you, if I may.
Sure.
And if anyone has any other questions, please just go into the question box and just type them in. And our first question is, who should be doing the checking, i.e. the checking on the program? The channel managers or the program manager?
I can start by saying I think that everybody needs to be involved in looking over the program. If there's people that feel that they shouldn't be, add them to the discussion. If these are folks that have a stake in your program, they should be understanding what's going on with it. Laz, do you agree?
If you think about it, yes, you've got there's a balanced ownership here, right? You've got the channel manager owns the success with that particular partner, but he's not going to be successful unless the program manager is providing the tools and the governance over the program. So I think I think one is accountable and the other one can contribute and be responsible for certain activities like the channel manager, but by no means do they own that program.
Right.
Okay. And our next question is all about ROI. How do you plan or drive the ROI component with traditional marketing focused partners who may not have the capabilities or knowledge to provide the analytics? So how do you get those analytics? How do you work with the partners to make sure you're really getting insight into what's happening as a result of the funds that you're providing?
I could take a stab if you want.
Sure.
So just real quick, I think that's where, you can't take anything for granted. You saw, I think Emily did it in her milestone. You could see at the end, there are incentives for partners who are reporting back. And I'm not just talking about providing you a connection to their CRM where you can see things better. I'm talking about having them come back and let you know where the deal has moved to. Has it moved into pipeline? Has it moved into qualified? Has it moved into close? And giving them incentives for doing that, whether it's earning points or better margin or whatever the case would be. But I think those finish line incentives are often overlooked. And I think if you put them in place, you'll get better visibility. Emily, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's working through and including the data points up front that you want to understand. Working through with the partner and saying, okay, what are we trying to get to? What information do we want to gather? What's important? And then tying that back in the end in order to say, did we hit our milestones? What did we collect? Whatever that looks like. I think that we could go on for 3 hours on various ways to collect ROI and what should be included and in what types of incentive programs.
Yeah.
Okay. And another question: there are lots of things we're trying to incent. We're trying to incent behaviors. We're trying to incent increased revenue performance. Have you guys got any guidelines for the people on the call as to where you're seeing the dollars spent? Is there a typical pattern where companies are spending X on driving behaviors and Y on driving performance? What are you seeing, and are there any trends in that area?
I think the balance is falling to performance. I think channel programs that put too much into the behavior have to look at what they're doing in their program and see why partners aren't doing the things you're asking them to do. Maybe you're making it too difficult for them and so on. So I think there's the efficiency factor. And I think while you have to make sure that you have seamless experience, that you think incentives through and have a solid plan, all of these things, I think that's efficiency. But nobody gets a promotion for efficiency. You get the promotion for effectiveness, for driving results. And that's why I see a lot more incentives being placed on, like Emily said, sourcing the first deal, the second deal, reporting back on deals, growing the pipeline. So there has to be a result to all of this. And I think that the trend is moving towards more performance.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for a certain period of time, we were hearing things based on behavior, right? I think that rewarding based on behavior was big, and certainly it's still something that we hear a lot of. And so it might still be, a bit of a mix. But I think with the current state of what's going on, we're probably going to see it trending towards performance because it's going to be a necessity.
Right. Absolutely.
Excellent. Got another great question. What is your experience on providing an e-commerce site where sales reps can pick their own rewards?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, go
ahead. No, it's an interesting question to
Ladies
begin
first,
with, right?
Emily, go far away.
Yeah.
I think that when you're looking at providing, facilitating rewards, I think that going to a site for your partner sellers to be able to view their rewards, to be able to see what's happening, that's the most important thing. I don't know about, anything new or novel ways of presenting that, but certainly facilitating that through an infrastructure is important. And when you think about the salesperson and what makes their eyes light up, it's dollars and things, right? And extras. And that's what rewards programs are. They're getting incentivized on top of hopefully the commissions that they're already making for the company. So, for instance, Vistex has a very store-like interface for partners to use. So certainly, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by e-commerce, but it should be very store-like. Pick and choose what you want to plop in your basket for the points that you've earned based on your claims.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. That visibility is incredible. Automate it. Remember, most people are doing this in a very rudimentary way. I think the idea of doing it on an e-commerce site is right in line with the gamification and catering to the millennial crowd and all of that. So I'm not going to discard it by any means, but I think you have to it's activity and reward, right? You wouldn't want them to pick the activity that they're going to get rewarded for. I think that if you want them to do a certain thing, you put them in that direction, and then after they finish, then they could pick the reward that they want, because they might prefer one thing over another, depending on the organization. Maybe a company doesn't allow for individual rewards, but others do, right? So I think as long as you're going down the right activity and you're not having them pick your goals, then you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we're almost out of time, so I've got quite a few questions. So one of the things we'll do is we'll put up a Q&A system, and the questions that we haven't been able to get to, I will basically ask Emily and Laz to answer, but I'll go in with one final sort of question that I think is the perennial question, and it's not just about incentives. I think it's about behaviors. How do you get partners to own more of the sales cycle as opposed to just passing or throwing over a lead?
I think you got to.
Oh, go ahead.
I think you got to educate them. The problem with a lot of suppliers and partners when it comes to the sales cycle is that they're speaking two different languages, right? And so I think if you have a shared funnel where you can have questions about not just leads, but how many hand raisers did you get? How many did you qualify? How many were registered back in our system? How many turned into a pipeline opportunity? I just described the 5 metrics in a demand waterfall, right? So I think you have to kind of start by educating your partners to understand what that vocabulary is about leads, right? So that you could have a conversation when something goes wrong. Because typically when something does go wrong, it's only going to be one part of that funnel that's broken, and there's no sense in throwing it all out. You might just want to say, hey, we're having a little bit of trouble here at the closing stage or in the middle stage, plus that'll give you a better idea where to focus your incentives.
Laz, Emily, thank you very much indeed for a fabulous webinar. We've had some great questions, and as I say, we've got a few more. So if you're one of the people whose question hasn't been answered, I promise you that Emily and Laz will answer that question, and we will get back to you with the answer, but that answer will also be copied into the Q&A session that we'll set up after this. So Laz, Emily, thank you very much indeed. And thank you all for participating in what I think has been a terrific webinar with some great insight on incentives. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.